Sometimes I think that as much as we have to say in America and what we're allowed to say to the world um, via these podcasts and these channels, many people just aren't listening. I've not seen such a disconnect in what my community, particularly, have been saying about the current administration by virtue of our vote consistently for decades. For the world to then look at America as it is right now and be surprised or shocked by what they're seeing. We're going to take a deep dive in what it is to be 13% of the US population, what that means politically, and how those politics affect our generational wealth building and our influence around the globe. Why is it that many of my listeners are so shocked of what's going on in the country right now? Let's take a deep dive into that. This is one man's opinion right here, right now on the Ujamaa Network. Now, we're going to have to first dispel some myths or some misconceptions that you may have about African Americans in this country. As a 55-year-old Gen Xer, you do not see a representation of me online or in movies. What you see are the youth. You hear the youth in our music. You hear or see a representation of thuggish behavior. We're either that or we're Barack Obama's, right? You don't see the total picture of what it is to be an African American in this country. And that's not your fault. This is just an image that is being dispensed to you. So when you meet a real one, you have the same kind of perspective as what's been installed in you via media. You're not the only ones. The same thing has happened on this side of the ocean, no matter where you come from. You know, we view certain members of certain cultures as the thing we consume. So, whether you're from sub Saharan Africa, the Far East, you know, Korea, China, Japan, we have a view based on what we see or have seen. And it doesn't hold a whole lot of truth or history or knowledge to that because this is just what we see. What you don't see about African Americans in this country is that we've been in this fight for a very long time. And there's a particular sentiment that was being spread not only in the African nations but around the world that Americans, not just African Americans, we're just lazy people, you know. And the reason that you're able to come to this country and take advantage of all these opportunities is because you're not lazy. That in itself is a slap in the face to every American, especially African Americans, when that narrative is being produced. First and foremost, any opportunity that you have available to you upon arriving here, at least up until this administration, someone had to bleed for. Somebody had to fight for it. And that somebody was this community. All right. And let's be historically accurate. It was this community that suffered, but it was a segment of the Caucasian American community, the abolitionists, who are able to bring forth laws to make it happen. See, that's the part of historical contexts that get missed. It didn't just happen because a lot of black people were pissed off. There were a lot of good, and I want to preference this good American people, because there were a lot of people who saw the inhumanity of an institution like slavery and saw a path forward to equality, true equality amongst people. You should not be holding people as cattle and then profiting off that cattle and their labor. What a novel concept. It's not new to America. We just held on to it a lot longer than a lot of the countries around the world, save the Middle East, who still have those tendencies. But that's another topic. We're talking about the U.S. right now. So, with that historical context, and from what I'm seeing online, when it comes to the work ethic of African Americans, and we're just not taking advantage of those opportunities. Who do you think brought those forward? Another misconception is that African Americans don't know who they are, or where they're from, as illustrated on this podcast.
Say when people say where you from?
America.
No, where's your country?
My country is America. I was born in New York, raised in.
Where your parents from?
My parents are from New York.
Americans, they don't know where they're from, you know.
No, I think American black people are the most lost black people in the world.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you see black people over here. You know where they come from? We all know where we come from.
What are some negative stereotypes y'all heard about black men from your parents, from your friends?
You literally said it all.
Yeah. That's it?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, my mom would tell me not to marry that.
Yeah.
Right.
She says it all the time.
My parents are both from Grenada. They came here in the 80s and 90s. So what he was saying about how they think that black people are lazy does resonate with me, because I've heard that a lot.
And I'm West African, Nigerian, because if you remember the movie Sugar Hill, and there's a scene where they're doing the thing with the drug dealer, and the guy said, we can't work with Akata. That's a word that they were calling the American blacks, Akata, the Nigerians. Akata is a word that they use for American blacks. And Wesley Snipes was like, yo, what is this Akata shit you keep calling us? And the guy goes, we don't want to work with cotton pickers. Africans come to America, and there's a lot of my African-American friends say, man, a lot of Africans are really mean towards us. They're really nasty towards us because they feel they're better towards us.
You being a man from an African family, what would your family say about you bringing like an American woman?
My daughter's mom is American. Most African parents, if we're being honest, they would actually prefer you bring home a white person.
I can't categorically say every Nigerian got this talk, but a lot of Nigerians that travel abroad got this talk from their family, where they will sit you down and tell you, you're going there, don't go and talk to those black Americans. You just go and get pregnant, you get into drugs, you become the gang banging. They give you that talk that just go to the white community, find a nice place, they just go and be decent, stay with the white people. They give you that talk. So when you enter America, you already have a perception of African Americans. You judge them.
Well, we don't want them, yeah?
They're your brothers and sisters.
They're not our brothers.
They are.
They were taken away. Unfortunately, we will develop by our...
We know exactly who we are. We know where we're from. But unlike with colonization, where you were allowed to be Yoruba or Igbo or Twi, and that was a thing, that ended here on this side of the Atlantic, despite the characteristics that may have remained, some of the personality traits or the, just the being. You don't get individuals of my shade or lack thereof because there was respect given between one tribe or another. So to answer the question, we don't know where we come from. Wrong. This is the product of where we come from and where we are. There are individuals on both sides of the Atlantic when it comes to the diaspora that will say African Americans are not African. We are African American. We are definitely different in the way we think. Now, some things may have stayed, but our people are more than their food and their behaviors, right? And their looks, or more than that. It's more diverse than that. But to tell an African American you don't know where you come from, and you're proudly Nigerian, and you're proudly Ghanaian, or you're proudly pick your country. The truth of the matter is, much after the transatlantic slave trade, you didn't call yourselves Nigerian. What did your parents call the land that you occupied in the 1950s? Because Nigeria was still an area of colonization. It didn't have an actual name, one that wasn't given to it by a colonialist. That name, Nigerian, that's not what your people called it. So do you know where you come from? And this is not meant to be a slight, because again, this is one man's opinion. I don't know what I don't know about the history of an entire people. It would be foolish and arrogant of me to dispel this, to try to bring awareness to this. But here's what I do know. We, African Americans, are not here because of choice. That choice was made for us, not only by the slavers, but the individuals who took part in the slave trade on that side of the ocean. Don't forget that. Because upon getting in these ships, by sheer force and murder and all kinds of other things, language and traditions were beaten out of my ancestors. Don't forget that part. So whatever they were became us after those hundreds of years of being held captive and being bred with. If I show you right now what my genealogy says, there's no conclusive evidence other than, hey, I didn't originate here, despite the fact that progenitors of my very being were native to this land. There are generations of pairs from the UK, from sub-Saharan Africa, West Coast. So how dare you attempt to tell me what I do or do not know? You have to have that kind of awareness to even begin to discuss why it is that so many of us find it so confusing that the world got it so wrong on this individual, given the history of our countries. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Now, given that context, you start to understand how it is that this individual in office was able to creep up. He rode the divisiveness between our own community here in the United States to enact the policies that he is now putting towards each one of these migrant communities. When you got here, you didn't embrace that Black community. Nah. You wanted to make yourself uniquely identifiable by your culture and your traditions to make sure you're not going to be lumped in with those African Americans, right? But then you got that Negro wake-up call, because the racial majority don't care what you call yourself. Your skin was darker. You spoke a different language. time to go. That's what they're telling you. That's what they're telling you. And that is the basis for all of this stuff. So if you're seeing any upheaval in the places that you're coming from, and you're now looking at that one group of people who voted for the current um, elected official in the White House, you see what it is, and now all of a sudden it starts to make a little bit more sense why we voted the way we voted. Not for you by any stretch of imagination. You know, one thing black people have been has been consistent. You know, we vote for our best interest. And if those interests just happen to align with your interests, so be it. But the bottom line is, we understood what this was from the get. We have clear recollection and memory and our presence, our present time. We know what it is, what obstacles we face, due to what laws. Maybe you didn't understand the assignment when you got here. Maybe you forgot because you were too busy trying to assimilate. Now you know. Now you know what it is. Now, again, context is everything. And now that you have that particular context from one man's perspective, now let's talk about what's going on today in relations to the politics of what you're seeing with the ICE raids and everything else that's going on in the crackdown on anything immigration related. So, you see what the history is. Despite what you may have believed about African Americans, you get here, you by and large shit on African Americans as laid out in those snippets. You know, you believe we're lazy, you believe the narrative. Okay, you got here, you saw something much different than what was being portrayed. Now, does that say you didn't see that thuggish behavior? Oh, no, you sure did. I'm a product of that as well. But what you didn't get was who put that moniker on black people and what those circumstances were of why black people, by and large, are so fearful of the police, because we know that despite what you've been told in the media, and despite what you may think about us, a lot more black Americans are law-abiding citizens than what you see incarcerated. African Americans are 13% of the U.S. population. All right. We voted in that last election overwhelmingly against this individual. Keep in mind, for a good part of this century, up until a few years ago, incarcerated individuals could not vote. Okay. In some states, they still have obstacles, but you can vote now, by and large, whether you've been incarcerated or not. But at 13% of the population, that's roughly 34, 36 million people who identify as African American, not Somali American, not Haitian American, not whatever American, as black people. 36 million people. That's roughly the population of Ghana. Roughly. So if you take every person who identify as African American, and Ghana being what, the size of Texas, I believe, what would that mean politically as far as a voting bloc? Well, as we found out, with over 90% of African American women voting against Trump and over 85 to 89% African American men voting against Trump, it still didn't mean anything. The result was the same. He was elected. And why was he elected? Well, because we are only 13% of the population. Now, there were considerable other groups who had the opportunity to vote But that vote was by and large split. Uh, the one real shocker to some was the Hispanic vote. Despite all the rhetoric and the talk about deportation of only the criminals, what you found out was that Cubans for Trump, Latinos for Trump, yeah, they went overwhelmingly, well, large degree to the Republican Party. They believed what this individual was saying, and they now are paying the consequences for that. It's their families that are being torn apart, and it's one of those things where, and I told you so, is just not going to cut it, because now the question is, well, where are the African Americans at to help us? African Americans, by and large, hear that question, and back of our mind, who came to help you? You know, they knew, the world knew what was going on at the inception of this country, how America became its superpower, what it had done to not just the African Americans, but the Native Americans who were here before them. Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to really check yourself and see what angle you're going to try to approach this thing at. Because if you're now asking for African American assistance in this struggle, and we've been struggling here the entire time you entered the country, and you by and large left that part of the equation out, it's very difficult for us to reconcile your vote for this institution, for this administration, versus the reality that we're seeing right now. You know, for the most part, you get a lot of disdain. Now there's a little bit of understanding, I guess. It's starting to come around that people, they still have the opinion that African Americans are lazy and unintelligent. But they're starting to see that, hey, maybe they're not as slow as we thought they were. They sure do know how to get their shit together, by and large. But what we're seeing here is that because we know what this nation is capable of, we have to move in a particular fashion, you know, because we know we have nowhere to go. There's no home to go back to. This is home. This is home. And unlike those who are being deported, you can't deport a Native American to America. You can't deport an African American to African American land, because this is it. You know, it's just not happening. Now, there are some efforts underway in this administration to try to remove even American citizens. And this is all an offshoot of what happened in that election. So as we begin to talk about the political ramifications of what we have as Americans in this country, the power and the influence we have, that influence is only tempered by what the racial majority of this country feels. And right now, the racial majority are looking at those incidents in Minnesota where people with white skin were shot and killed. And they're looking at it and piecing together, hey, the things that African Americans are saying, hey, this just happened to us. But two people that look like me. Again, it doesn't do us any good to be like, hey, see, I told you. No. It's what you do now with the information, now that you know what it is. Now, economically, going forward, the same opportunities that were present before this administration were still here. Instead of wondering why black people didn't make it in America the way other groups do when they come here, what industries did you help support here? You had products, you had land, you had resources. No inroads were made to an American citizens. No, you inserted members of your own people, your own family into America and did business with that family member. That's totally understandable. That's what you do. But it reinforces that narrative that you already had, that, we just couldn't do the work. No, we had no resources. Slavery didn't leave us with an inheritance. So that is part of what it is. It's about resources. It's always been about resources. It's never going to be about anything else. So when you have those resources and you allow other individuals or other countries to take possession of those resources and distribute it on their own market, meanwhile, paying you pennies on the dollar for your own resources that you're harvesting, collecting, and you're seeing the profits that these individuals are making in their own country off of something that you don't value as much. Well, it's just like how you didn't value the people that were put on those ships so many hundreds of years ago. I read one account where certain vessels from the Dutch were packed filled with iron, moved to the different nations of Africa, or different tribes of Africa, and that iron was offloaded, bodies were unloaded, and traded us for a spoon. It is what it is. And now here we are, hundreds of years later, debating what our role should be in this political environment. We've showed you what our role is. Every time a good decision was made in this country politically, it was at the core of good and evil. And good people, black and white, made the best decision they could at the time, given the climate. I think that's going to happen again, but we don't know, because we just do not have the separation of powers that we once believed we had. And tune in again, and we'll talk about the chaos that has erupted because these three co-equal branches of government are not so equal and are not separated. We'll talk about that in another round. Digest this for a second and let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you later.